Hello, 7th and 8th grade literature class. We are continuing to talk about tone in poetry. At the very beginning of the year, we went in depth about how poetry doesn't have to be beautiful or sweet to get its point across. Usually when people think of poetry, they think of something about love, something that's inside of a card that they might read. But the truth is, poetry runs the gamut of emotions and subjects. So we talked about that a lot at the beginning of the year, and then with every new poem we've read, we revisited that idea. And we're going to revisit that idea again today. Our next poem is called Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night. Just as we always do, we're going to read the poem 3 times, once just to get the feel of the poem. The second time, we're going to take it apart, line by line, sometimes word by word, to find out what the poet is actually trying to say. And then the third time to get the full experience of the poem once we truly understand it. So as we read it, I want you to be thinking in your head about tone. First of all, that is the attitude of the author towards its subject matter, his subject matter. And also I want you to think about, is this about something that is beautiful or is it something else? Okay, you probably already assumed from my tone that it's about something else, but listen very carefully and see what you find. Here we go. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men, who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Okay, going back to the beginning, this is a poem by Dylan Thomas. Some think it was inspired by his father's passing. It very likely was, but it doesn't mean it was specifically about his father's passing. Remember that poets will often use a secondary type of character that they've created to narrate their poems. That's called the speaker. But did you hear how, even though the word gentle is in the title of the poem, this is not about going gently. To go gentle means to just very quietly slip away. And he's saying just the opposite. He's saying, do not go gentle into that good night. I've heard this poem read before, where it is read almost as if it's saying goodbye in a very sweet, kind way. But when you read the words, it doesn't call for that at all. So I've heard it more along the lines of, do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at the close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. That makes absolutely no sense. This is about being angry at the end of life. Okay, so we're going to go through it line by line. Here we go. Do not. There is an imperative statement there. Do not do this. Do not go gentle into that good night. The good night in this case is death. So this speaker is telling his father, do not just give up and slip away. You need to fight. You do not go gentle or quietly into death. He says then, old age should burn and rave at close of day. So his father is of an older age. He's dying of old age, or very likely some kind of disease or affliction due to old age. So, but he's saying old age shouldn't just be quiet and slip away. Old age should burn. It should rave. To rave means to be very, very angry, to rage out at the close of day. And then he says, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Again, dying of the light is another euphemism for death in this case. Then he's going to give some examples. He said, though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Okay, so though wise men, people who are wise have gained knowledge and they've applied that knowledge. So he says, so even people who are wise, they understand that at the end of life, there's death. They get that. They still don't want to go gentle into that good night. They still don't want to give up. So he says, even though wise men at their end know dark is right, it's going to happen. Because their words had forked no lightning. Here are wise men who have been trying to get their message across, and they're frustrated that they can't quite say everything that they need to say before their time is up on earth. So because their words had forked no lightning, hadn't had an impact that they wanted, they do not go gentle into that good night. They're fighting against that death. Then the next example is good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So good men coming in waves, and each one who comes in waves, just like waves on a seashore, one group after another coming, and all of them are crying about their frail deeds. They've been good men, they have done good things, but they're saying, but wait, where is our impact? What impact have we had on the world around us? Why aren't we surrounded by the results of our good deeds? Their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. The idea that that bay are those waves of good men, and the frail deeds are just not, they're not there. They're not surrounding these men at the end. And these men are saying, we want to see that impact, and therefore we want to rage against the dying of the light. We don't want to die until we see the impact of our good deeds. So the first example we have is wise men who are upset. They don't want to go to death because they didn't make an impact with their words. Good men do not want to die because they haven't made an impact with their deeds. And then we go on to the next example. The next example is wild men. Wild men who caught and sang the song in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Wild men could be interpreted a couple of ways. One way would be you're talking about people who lived long, long ago and worshiped the sun. That is the most common application of this. But what about men who aren't necessarily educated, aren't necessarily considered good in society, aren't necessarily considered wise in society, but yet follow the instincts of humankind as they watch the sun rise and fall, and they live their day by the patterns of nature? They are looking at their lives and saying, what have we done? How have we impacted anything? We have grieved the sun on its way because we haven't had an impact on life itself. They also do not go gentle into that good night because they don't see an impact for their lives, the way they've lived. So we have people who are upset that they haven't made an impact with their words, people who are upset that they haven't made an impact with their deeds, people who are upset that they haven't made an impact with their very lives. They don't go gentle into that good night because they want to continue on and make that impact. Then next, we have grave men, near death, who see with blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Here he's talking about the elderly, people who have lived their lives, and now they see that death is right there. It's right around the corner. They can see it with blinding sight. And yet the next line says their blind eyes. Their blind eyes can blaze like meteors and be gay. They can be powerful when they look at you. They can be happy when they look at you. But these are grave men. They're near death. They see death coming, and yet they rage against the dying of the light, even though they are technically already blind, even though they are technically one foot already in the grave. They are raging against the dying of the light. Why? Because the light has had no impact on them. And then here we go. And you, my Father, there on the sad height. So he's talking now about, the speaker is talking about his father who is dying. And you, my Father, there on the sad height, look at you, you're up there, you're a pinnacle in my life. Curse. Now, We don't encourage cursing at our school, not at all. But this, if you want to take this and put it in biblical perspective, this is something that was told to Job by his wife when she said, look, everything you've touched has disappeared. It has fallen apart. It has not worked out for you. And after Job lost everything, his wife said, curse God and die. Now, Job didn't do that. But here you have the speaker saying, curse, Dad, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears. He's not telling his dad to curse God and die. He's saying, Dad, fight, fight, fight. Bless me now with your fierce tears. That would be more of a blessing to me than seeing you go gentle into the good night. He says, bless me with your fierce tears, I pray. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Now, here's the thing about this man. There is no hint in his child's words that his dad has not made an impact on him. In fact, we see a huge impact brought forth because this boy wants so badly for his father to stick around to fight for his life. Okay? Now, as I said before, this is not a poem to be read quietly or with solemnity, that's solemnness or seriousness. It's meant to be performed with dramatic gestures and a loud voice. The speaker is begging, pleading, and yelling for his father to fight death. He is angry at the thought that his father is just giving up on his life. Now, of course, I have to put the meme on there because I love it's a dramatic cat. I mean, you can't be any funnier than that. But I love this cat dramatizing, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. The speaker is pointing out that men throughout history have fiercely fought against dying quietly, and he tries to rally his father's spirit to fight as well. So when the reader performs this poem, it calls for dramatic and sometimes overly dramatic acting skills, like our cat here. It can be a powerful piece if the reader puts himself in the place of the desperate speaker. So when we read this story or this poem, it's not pretty, but it's impactful. And it does have an incredible message from this son to his father that he needs to fight against the dying of the light. Okay, so we're going to read it one more time. Now that we know everything about this, we can go through and we're going to be a little more dramatic this time. So sorry. Here we go. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on that sad height? Curse! Bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. When you do your homework for this poem, go back through and read it. Ask yourself what you would say to someone who is about to slip into that good night. Would you want them to go peacefully? Would you want them to fight? I lost my dad a couple of years ago now. Honestly, he didn't need to fight. He had already fought a very good fight. And when it was his time, it was peaceful. And when he went gentle into that good night, it was a relief to him. But the most relief was knowing that he wasn't just dying, he was going to heaven. Okay. Our next poem, also not exactly beautiful, but it does have some beauty in it. It's called The Mirror by Sylvia Plath. You'll notice on the right side of your screen, there is a mirror set up for you there. to look at. But Sylvia Plath is going to be using the mirror as this focal point for this poem. The first part is going to be about an actual mirror, and the second part is going to be a lake that reflects just as a mirror reflects. I'll give you that much hint before we read it through the first time. Ready? The Mirror by Sylvia Plath. I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately, just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. I'm not cruel, only truthful. The eye of the little god four-cornered. Most of the time, I meditate on the opposite wall. It is pink with speckles. I've looked at it so long, I think it is a part of my heart, but it flickers. Faces and darkness separate us over and over. Now I am a lake. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. Then she turns to those liars, the candles or the moon. I see her back and reflect it faithfully. She rewards me with tears and an agitation of hands. I'm important to her. She comes and goes. Each morning it is her face that replaces the darkness. In me she has drowned a young girl, and in me an old woman rises toward her day after day like a terrible fish. Okay, I know some of you are saying, huh, what? Okay, which is why we take it apart. That's what you do with poetry. I have had calls from students who've gone into college who've said, Mrs. S., we were just given a poem and we have no idea what we're looking at here. And I walk them through exactly what I'm walking you through here. You have to take it apart line by line. And because I've already taught them and they need to learn on their own, I'll walk them line by line and have them explain it to me. And it turns out that they already know what they're looking for. They just need a little guidance. But for you, because you're in junior high, let's go through it and we're going to talk about what every line means. Ready? I am silver and exact. The backing of a mirror used to be made with silver nitrate, which was sprayed onto a piece of plain glass and then reflected the image of the person who's looking into the mirror. It's just a shiny surface. Okay, so the mirror was silver. The fact that it's exact, if you look at any mirror, it's only going to reflect back exactly what they see. Okay, when you stand in front of the mirror, that's you. That's what you look like. The mirror, who is the speaker in this poem, says, I have no preconceptions. The mirror isn't thinking, oh, okay, Mrs. S is getting up early this morning. I'm going to make sure she has a good day. I'm going to make her look really good this morning. No, when I look in the mirror first thing in the morning, I see myself as I am when I look in the mirror. Then the mirror says, whatever I see, I swallow immediately. That is kind of a freaky idea, the fact that this mirror not only sees the reflection, but it swallows the reflection. It takes it in. Just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. There is no way to bribe a mirror to make yourself look better. He says, I am not cruel, only truthful. The mirror has no cruelty built into it. It has no lies built into it. It is just truthful. And then it calls itself the eye of a little god, four-cornered. The idea that somebody would worship the mirror because of what they see in it, which is themselves. Worshiping themselves, looking in the mirror all the time. It says, most of the time I meditate on the opposite wall. This is really kind of an interesting thought. When there's nobody standing in front of the mirror is still reflecting. It reflects exactly what it sees. And for this mirror in this poem, it's reflecting on the wall that's directly across from it. And this wall is pink with speckles. It says, I have looked at it so long, I think it's part of my heart. This is a callback to what we just looked at when it says the eye of a little god four-cornered. If someone spends all of their time looking in the mirror, looking at themselves, they're not really worshiping the mirror, they're worshiping themselves. The mirror is focused completely on the wall across from it. It's become its heart. When we look at ourselves too much, we become our own gods. We look at ourselves too much. We meditate on ourselves, and so therefore we become more selfish and we become very self-worshipful, which we shouldn't be doing. It says then, but it flickers. That's the wall across from the mirror. but it flickers. Faces and darkness separate us over and over. Daily, the sun rises. There's faces in front of the mirror separating it from the wall, and then there's darkness. In the dark, the mirror can't reflect anything, so therefore it can't see the wall. So faces and darkness separate us over and over, day after day after day after day. Then the mirror says, now I am a lake. Now this isn't a literal lake, but it's giving us a picture of someone going to a lake and bending over the water like it's a reflective surface, like it's a mirror. It says, now I am a lake. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. Remember, the mirror is truthful. It's not going to have any preconceptions, but the person who's looking in the mirror, you ready for this twist? The person who's looking in the mirror does have preconceptions. We have preconceptions when we look in our mirrors. We have an idea of what we look like, and when we look differently, it surprises us. So here's a woman bent over the mirror, searching the mirror for what she really is. She's not going to find out who she really is just by the way she looks. She's looking in the wrong place here. But because she doesn't like what she sees in the purely physical part of looking in the mirror says, then she turns to those liars, the candles or the moon. Candles provide light, and they provide very, very flattering light, especially as women age. They provide very flattering light to women. The moon, however, reflects light. And as it reflects, it shines that light, bounces that light off the sun onto the woman and makes her look good. So the candles or the moon make her look better than what she really does. The mirror says, I see her back. Because she's turned away from the mirror to look at the liars, the candles, or the moon. He says, I look at her back and I reflect it faithfully. It doesn't matter what she does. It doesn't matter who she turns to. The mirror will always tell the truth. She rewards me with tears and an agitation of hands. The picture that she is touching her face, which you're not supposed to do in a quarantine. She's touching her face. She's trying to manipulate her face to look the way she believes she should look because of her preconceptions. I am important to her. She's looking at this mirror to see who she really is. You better believe that's important to her. She comes and goes. Every day she's in and out looking at the mirror. Each morning, it is her face that replaces the darkness. So first thing in the morning, light comes on, her face is right there in the mirror. In me, she has drowned a young girl. Remember that the mirror is now describing itself as a lake and taking in whatever it sees. So this woman has been looking in this mirror for most of her life, and she has been looking into this mirror since she was a young girl. And every day she looks into the mirror, and the mirror takes in what it sees and reflects it back. But this woman's going to age. So the mirror says, in me, she has drowned a young girl, meaning she has aged. So the young girl is no longer there. She looks for it in the mirror, but it's not there anymore. And in me, an old woman rises toward her day after day. Now the mirror is reflecting back the truth that this woman has indeed aged. She can look as much as she wants. She's never going to find the young girl in that mirror ever again. She's only going to see what's reflected back to her faithfully, the reflection of an old woman. And I love this last little bit here where it says, rises toward her every day like a terrible fish. Remember, it's a lake. The idea that this thing is coming toward this woman, that old age, that is just keeping this woman so attached to her mirror, wanting to stop the aging process, and it won't happen because that's life. Okay. So now we've taken it apart little bit by little bit. Let's go back and read it all again so that you'll understand it. The Mirror by Sylvia Plath. I am silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately, just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. I am not cruel, only truthful. The eye of the little god four-cornered, most of the time I meditate upon the opposite wall. It is pink with speckles. I have looked at it so long, I think it is part of my heart, but it flickers. Faces and darkness separate us over and over. Now I am a lake. A woman bends over me, searching my reaches for what she really is. Then she turns to those liars, the candle or the moon. I see her back and reflect it faithfully. She rewards me with tears and an agitation of hands. I am important to her. She comes and goes. Each morning it is her face that replaces the darkness. In me she has drowned a young girl, and in me an old woman rises toward her day after day like a terrible fish. So the speaker of this poem is the mirror. That's what we're getting from. So it's the mirror from the title. Even although it's an inanimate object, the mirror is given human/godlike characteristics, and that's called personification. In the first part of the poem, it announces that it is, well, I put that twice. It is perfectly truthful without preconception. It only reflects what it sees. In the second part of the poem, the mirror declares itself a lake that has mysterious depth. The woman who stares into that lake is looking for more than just a reflection. She is looking for answers about who she really is. The mirror answers truthfully, but the woman would rather be told lies. This beautiful picture here by Norman Rockwell so beautifully shows the ideas of what people search for in the mirror. What they look for is not necessarily what they see. So here is this absolutely gorgeous little girl sitting on a bench looking into the mirror, and you'll see on her lap there is a magazine with a glamorous movie star on the lap, and she's looking at the magazine and then looking at herself and wondering if she'll ever look like the lady in the magazine or if she will ever be that beautiful. It's a picture that is both beautiful and sad, which is the whole point, much like this poem. You have this little girl who is, she is really beautiful, but she's a little girl and she should be looking exactly like this at her age. She has propped that mirror up next to a chair. You can see the chair behind the mirror. And she's sitting on a little stool, which is very common for little kids. Back in the day, they would sit on little stools like that. She has a comb and a brush on the floor next to her. You can see she's done her hair up, all very pretty. But to the side of the mirror, you'll notice that there's a doll that has been abandoned. This is a little girl who's getting ready to abandon her childhood to try to act like more of an adult, which is, again, sad and beautiful all at the same time. Okay, that is really all we have time for today. Our timer is about to go off in about 2 minutes, but that's fine. I am going to leave you with this. Go ahead and do the homework for these 2 poems. I hope that you reread them, get something out of them, and I'll talk to you next time we have literature class. Have a really good night.